My name's Kent Barton. I'm with Ethereum Denver. I founded our community back in 2014. I work in the blockchain space right now. I like to say that blockchain ate my life. It's really all-encompassing in a good way. I also was part of the ETH Denver Hackathon earlier this year. And it's been really cool to see the community, the blockchain community in Denver and Boulder grow over the past several years. We started out with a really vibrant Bitcoin community back in the day and really building on the shoulders of what they did. And I think Denver and Boulder has the potential to be a crypto hub, much like Silicon Valley has, that their sort of breed of tech out there. We could be the hub for blockchain innovation and decentralization.
Well, thanks, Ken. It's great to have you here, and welcome to DISCON. And so at DISCON here, you spoke about crypto tribalism. Can you describe that topic a little bit?
So crypto tribalism is a phenomenon we've seen increasingly over the past few years where, back in the day, it was just pretty much Bitcoin, maybe a few other interesting projects, but everybody really had this spirit of like, wow, we can really make the world a better place. We can solve problems that exist with, whether it's central banking or a lot of centralized power structures, and everybody, back, 4, 5, 6 years ago, generally was really excited about making the world a better place. There was this quasi-utopian vision. And if you fast forward to how things are today, the biggest change in the crypto space has been this Cambrian explosion of different projects and tokens. So now you have forks of Bitcoin itself, and then you have Ethereum, which is decentralized business logic and kind of a decentralized computer. You have different variants now of that smart contract paradigm. You have cryptocurrencies that are that aim to be really good at privacy, and some that aim to be really good at fast transactions. So you have all these different sort of things, and from a free market and individual choice standpoint, I think it's a wonderful development. People have more choices, and we're exploring new ideas. But the downside of this has been people getting mindlessly sort of supportive of their own project and having their blinders on and not seeing the big picture. Like, the big picture is all this technology collectively can make the world a better place. But we need to really realize that and embrace it. If we stay focused on our own unique projects and not just focused, it's okay to focus, but to the extent that we're pushing away other things and saying, well, this sucks over here, and just wasting time and energy putting other things down and not making logical, coherent arguments, that's going to be a detriment to the ecosystem. And the ultimate beneficiaries of this are the very same centralized powers that we're trying to disintermediate.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So it's probably a factor of having gone mainstream or having reached a sort of a broader mass that maybe there's a split in ideologies or also perhaps that the blockchain technology involves a lot of the cryptocurrencies, which relates to money, and it attracts people that want to capitalize on that versus people that want to use the technology to make a positive shift. And so do you see this this topic as being sort of a split in ideologies among the community itself, or how would you describe that?
I'd say maybe the core of the split or the root cause is what you touched on initially, is this financial sort of investment. When you put your money behind a project, you naturally become more biased towards something. So people invest in a project and they say, and they do it for a reason. Maybe they share the values and they share the vision. That's great. But when prices start to go up, as they tend to in crypto over time, people, maybe there's more serious money on the line and they get really invested in something, and then they start to see other projects as a threat. And then they start to, that sort of clouds their vision. If there wasn't that financial element, maybe they wouldn't be so combative and so tribal. But that's really driving a lot of it, that financial aspect. In some cases, there are different ideas of like, okay, a vision difference. A good example is with Ethereum and EOS. Ethereum is trying to be very decentralized, or maximally decentralized. Let's have a lot of different nodes and miners, and really make it very hard for somebody to, say execute a 51% attack where they get the majority of the network. Whereas in EOS, they have 21 block producers or people, 21 voting parties really, and their idea is, okay, we can sacrifice a bit of centralization, for scalability. Now it can be more like Visa and process a ton of transactions. So that right there is a very good example of a value split where, okay, EOS is willing to sacrifice some centralization to people that are more focused on maximal decentralization. That's like, okay, not good. So that's a great point where, hey, let's have some arguments about this, civil arguments, and let's that's the beauty of blockchain, is let's put it in the free market. Let's see what actually works. Mm-hmm. That's fine, but what's not fine is when you have these maximalist mentalities. Well, screw them. They're dismissing new technologies out of hand before they've even had a chance to do anything. Mm-hmm. And it's ironic that some people in Ethereum are acting that way, because the same thing happened with Ethereum back in the day when we were trying to, just build out, like, does this thing yet even work? People were very dismissive. Mm-hmm. So to call other projects, to be dismissive of other projects is sort of it's really antithetical to the whole idea of like decentralization. We should all feel mm-hmm. free to do our own thing, and you see this in a lot of, I used an Ethereum example, but you see this in many different cases where mm-hmm. there's these maximalist tribes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can see that. So absolutist mentality where, because it seems like the maximum decentralization is not always ideal because it comes at a cost for performance, for example, or so it should be a sliding scale where you want it decentralized enough, but where it still performs well, or but there ought to be a way to sort of guarantee a certain amount of decentralization, so that there's no and different applications could demand different degrees of decentralization to function effectively, and so it seems like the community needs to come together, certainly on those topics. So if there indeed is these splits, can you identify the different tribes, the different crypto tribes that exist?
Yeah, so you have your Bitcoin maximalists. Lately, now that there's this idea of like new smart contract platforms, you have this idea of Ethereum maximalist. It's not as common. You had the Bitcoin fork last year, which is Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash, and that's maybe the best example of like those two sides. I swear to God, they spend more time attacking each other than they do focused on building scalable technology. Like, that's the beauty of it, is, in crypto, anybody can, especially given enough community support, can fork something off and have their own community, and that's what's happened. And it kind of befuddles me to see like that. Just to use that one example, is like Bitcoin people always putting down Bitcoin Cash and wasting so much time and energy. It's like, dude, they're doing their own thing, like, and yeah, they're using the Bitcoin name, but who cares? Like, Ethereum Classic has the Ethereum name. Nobody gets upset about that. They waste so much time and energy on attacking this fork, and I think because a lot of them, at the core, they probably fear that somehow Bitcoin Cash will become the dominant scalable blockchain if you really distill it. And it's like, I just want to grab them and be like, just focus on building technology. Don't and have rational academic discussions about what scales and what doesn't, but the free market will ultimately decide. Mm-hmm.
Well, speaking about that split, for some of our listeners that might not know all the details about that, could you describe what caused the split in the first place, and where the ideologies differ?
That's a good question. So in Bitcoin, there is Bitcoin, just like all decentralized technologies, has a challenge of not being able to scale to the mainstream. Bitcoin does a handful of transactions a second. Visa does tens of thousands of transactions per second. So how do you scale but still be distributed and decentralized and not vulnerable to people taking over the network? So in Bitcoin, there's different ways forward, but one of the most prominent ideas was, let's create bigger blocks. In other words, let's include more information into every block that's included in this chain of blocks, the blockchain, which is a very reasonable approach. I mean, it makes sense. Like, if there's more information, let's just add more blocks. But what opponents said to that is, well, hold on a second. There's going to be a point where we're including so much information that not everybody, like the idea with Bitcoin is anybody can run a node and be processing these transactions. If there's too much information, then mining and especially running nodes will become the sort of the purview of people that have more money and more maybe big server farms. If you extrapolate this out, you could say, well, when does it end? If you keep building, making bigger block sizes over time to scale, what's the end result? You might have a situation where things are actually not fully decentralized, and there's some other arguments against it there. I don't have really a dog in that fight, but it's very emblematic of kind of this fundamental difference that's been happening in that community.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so aside from the Bitcoin tribe and the Bitcoin Cash tribe, are there other tribes that are identifiable or?
Yeah. So okay, here's another great example. Mm-hmm. Is and I think your listeners would very much appreciate this. Anybody that subscribes to the ethos of, say, pirate radio and like free speech and privacy. Privacy goes hand in hand with free speech, and it's this very, in my opinion, a very fundamental human right we should have, especially given these trends towards surveillance, universal surveillance that technology has afforded governments. So in response to that, we've collectively, as an ecosystem, we've developed privacy-preserving coins, where everything that happens on Bitcoin, so this is a common misnomer, but people say, well, oh, it's anonymous. It actually isn't. Like, it's very easy to trace transactions around the Bitcoin blockchain. It's everything that happens is out in the open, and if you somehow are able to identify an address with a person, you can kind of follow the trail, and it's all out there. So you have projects that seek to
correlate, maybe,
or make it perfectly anonymous. Okay. Ideally, like make it where you can't follow everything around. Like you have the same benefits, where you can send money to anybody, anywhere, and you don't need to trust a bank. But it all happens in a private way. And private money, this is not a far out concept. Like, this is something that the Swiss were very good at until the U.S. Kind of came in and said, stop doing that. With mm-hmm. It's a whole separate rabbit hole. But mm-hmm. Two technologies in particular have emerged: Zcash, the founder of which lives here in Boulder, and Monero. So you kind of have these two technologies, and they differ in a very fundamental technological way. They use different methods to achieve privacy, but they're both they're pursuing the end result, or the same end result, and the same benefit for the users. So unfortunately, what you're seeing is some supporters, and this is just objectively what I'm seeing right now. Again, I don't have a dog in this fight, but a lot of supporters of Monero, this one technology that uses something called ring signatures, are really vocally attacking this other technology, Zcash, which uses something called ZK snarks to achieve the same method. It all gets very techy, but to me, it's fucking ludicrous. Like those two projects, it's great there's multiple options on the market, and you see, you even see people there the founders of Monero, attacking Zcash, and not even in a really scientific way. Like, okay, let's kind of debate this through, and let's use science and reason and fact to discuss it. But just putting them down on Twitter, and it's douchey behavior. It's not. It's like, okay, do you care more about your ego and your just maybe the financial success of your project, or the fact that you win, or do you really care about, like, are you principled? Do you just, like, if they were truly principled, they would be okay with Zcash winning, because ultimately, if it is scalable and it works out, then guess what? Then your initial goal of having financial privacy has been enabled, albeit through a different method. And again, I'm not saying that people shouldn't discuss differences and say, well, this is a flaw, but it's the way it's done. It encourages personal attacks instead of focusing on the ideas, and just a perpetuation of that tribal mentality that I don't think gets us anywhere.
Mm-hmm. So in this whole space, do you see that maybe different conferences and different gatherings are catering to one tribe or another? Are they cliquey, or how do you experience that?
let's see. Like there are a lot of conferences that are just about one particular type of technology,
like trading versus the blockchain.
Well, like there's DevCon with Ethereum. Every year we have DevCon, and that's specifically for Ethereum. There's Satoshi Roundtable, which actually it's not open to the public. It's more of an invite thing only for people that, generally speaking, are more just Bitcoin people, and this kind of harkens back to back in the day. So there's that, and there's then there's some more blockchain agnostic ones like Consensus in New York every year. It's kind of a mix. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. The fact that there's conferences around different tech, because we all kind of specialize in our own thing. But it's very interesting to note that and I've seen this as a community organizer over the past 4 years, when you get people in the same room that are interested in different technologies. Online they might just be subscribing to these different ideas of like, well, fuck that ecosystem, or this blockchain is just being very dismissive about it. But something great happens when you get in the same room with people. You might fundamentally disagree with them on many things, but you know what? You sit down and have a beer and you enlighten yourself and you communicate ideas, and it's a great, beautiful thing. So I think we need more of this sort of like meat space interaction.
Mm-hmm. So how do you think it's going to play out in the future? Do you think that there's the stronger will survive, or do you think there's going to be some common ground that's going to be found, or just a little bit of both?
The beauty of it is, barring like heavy-handed government intervention, the free market will decide.
Mm-hmm.
So different blockchain projects maybe have a different vision of the future or different goals, but everybody will, like the ones that have the best value proposition, and especially the best ability to meet the goals or meet end users. Like, how do we bring this technology to the masses? Is it scalable, and is it really solving problems? Those will be the ones that survive, and no amount of tribal bickering is going to change that. So my suggestion for all the different people that involved in different technologies is just focus on building the best platform you can, and calmly discuss and debate differences with other people in the space. Maybe you'll learn something, but just focus on building cool, scalable things.
Mm-hmm.
And I think ultimately the free market will sort of reveal what the winners are, what the interesting technologies are. You can arguably say we've already seen that.
Mm-hmm.
Bitcoin has this idea of global non-central bank money that's proven to be very appealing for people. And Ethereum is this idea of a decentralized computer that anybody can use in a censorship-resistant way. And those are, in fact, by market cap, the two biggest cryptocurrencies.
Mm-hmm.
You also have privacy coins that are adding value. So let the market decide, and at the same time, people should explore what are our shared values and visions, and that's the beauty of decentralization. We can define these things without having to rely on sort of conglomeration around central powers.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, it's been good speaking to you, Kent. What's the next thing on your plate? Do you have any projects coming up, or hackathons coming up, or any other conferences that you're going to?
So we're about to start the initial planning for ETH Denver 2019. I was fortunate to be part of a really cool crew that did the hackathon last year, President's Day weekend. I believe to date it was the biggest, or at least as of the event, it was the biggest blockchain hackathon ever, and it was so interesting and cool to see people from all over the world get together and just focus on that core element of just building stuff. And that includes developers, but also it could be people like wanting to somehow use decentralization to get more creative. I'm a musician. It's what got me into crypto originally. I owe everything I have pretty much to music, and there's ways to kind of hack on that and leverage decentralization with music and the arts. And this stuff is so exciting for me. So that's definitely on my plate. And then also just kind of like trying to spread this message and remind people like about the big picture. We're getting so caught up into this, and crypto prices really affect that, especially in a rising market. People just fixate on their crypto wealth, but they're missing sight of the big picture and like the fact that this can make the world a better place.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Do you have any final words?
I would say to anybody thinking about joining this space, don't let this talk of tribalism overwhelm you or concern you. Like, it's something that I would not say is is so overwhelming, or it's not awful. It's just something it's an increasing trend that's a concern, but it should not dissuade you from joining, especially knowing in advance, like kind of just having a vision for what you want to do with technology and knowing that there's so many cool projects out there. So jump in with both feet, and always think for yourself, and be skeptical of anybody with big egos. Think for yourself and think about what you want to do with these projects. Your own idea is the most valuable. Empower yourself. For anybody that's already in this space, I would say just don't calm down with the constant dissing each other and each other's projects on social media. Like, let's have it's great to have differences of opinion, but let's sit down and have beers, or sit down and Skype with each other. Let's talk these things through.
Reach a consensus, huh?
reach a consensus. And even if we don't, hey, that's the beauty of it. We can have different visions. If you have a vastly different vision for decentralization than I do, that's great. People can support you or your vision. People will support this vision, and it's all voluntary. And in the end, it's like I said, it's kind of just, it floats on the free market, and we'll see what happens. I guess the final thought there would be it's not a zero-sum game. That's kind of the fundamental flaw that drives this thinking. Is the ecosystem is growing by leaps and bounds over the long term, whether you measure it by market cap, the number of developers involved, the number of projects, the amount of mainstream users that are starting to get involved. We're only I think it's akin to the mid-90s in the internet. We've only just gotten started. It's a growing pie. Don't feel like other projects are such a threat. In fact, there could be a lot of opportunities for cross-pollination and collaboration down the road. So, we don't need to, hold hands and sing Kumbaya and pretend, we're all together. That's not what decentralization is about. But let's celebrate our differences and talk through things and just be cool to each other and have fun. People have lost sight of having fun in this space. Let's have a good time and have fun being on the bleeding edge of tech.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you very much, Ken Barton.
Thank you.
Talking to
Appreciate it.
Yeah.